Welcome to this week's episode of Quarts versus / battery watches versus mechanical / automatic watches. This is for you to understand the difference. So right now, the watch you have is a quartz or a battery operated watch. So how these watches work is they have a battery, and the battery creates an electric current. That electric current travels down some wire, and this thing that looks like a tuning fork here is actually a quartz crystal. Which is really weird, I know. But they found that when you put electric current in certain types of quartz crystals, they vibrate, and they vibrate a certain amount of times per second. And what they found out is that it will actually vibrate so fast, which is 21,000 times in a second. And so they found out that they can keep time that way. So how a quartz watch works is they put electrical current into a quartz crystal, which starts vibrating. And we know that this specific type of crystal vibrates exactly the same, 20,000 times, no matter what, when there's an electrical current in it. So then they have a motherboard, an electrical board, which all it does is count. Every time this crystal gets up to 21,000, it makes the second hand tick. And then it vibrates again, 21,000, tick. So all it does is count over and over and over and over again. 0 to 21,000, 0 to 21,000, 0 to 21,000. And every time it hits 21,000, it goes tick, 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 tick. So every second tick you're getting is because that quartz crystal has started to vibrate 21,000 times. That's how quartz watches work. The reason quartz watches are so cheap is because they found out that this stuff right here, a battery, a quartz crystal, and a motherboard, are infinitely easier to manufacture than what you have to do for a mechanical watch. And not only that, because this number is so high, 21,000, if it were to only, it leaves little room for error because we know it's exactly 21,000 every single second. We know that quartz watches are going to be very, very, very accurate. So a quartz watch you can set the time once, and 10 years later, come back and look at it. And if that's, of course, if the battery didn't die, and it might only be 5 or 6 seconds off from the exact time. Like if you were to synchronize it with like some type of exact time clock, it might only be 5 seconds off because of how accurate they are. Now let's talk about automatic watches, which is the type of watch that's my favorite. That's the type of watch that's been around way before battery operated watches only have been around about 20, 30, 40, 50 years. What have been around for the longest time is actually mechanical or automatic watches, and they're so much cooler. I think they're less accurate, and I'll tell you why. So whereas battery-operated watches have a battery, mechanical watches have a spring. And this spring, if you wind it, and find a way to hold it there, because if you let go, it's just going to go boing and spring back loose. But if you find a way to hold it there with a lot of gears, sorry, I'm a terrible drawer of gears. These weird booger-looking things are actually gears. If you find a way to hold the tension in the spring with gears, it slows down how quickly it unwinds. And while it's unwinding, it's spinning these gears, and it makes this little thing. It's just a little balance wheel. It looks like a peace symbol. It's a little piece of metal in the shape of a wheel, and it just goes back and forth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it will do that 6 times a second. And so what they've done is now they're converting spring energy to this wheel, which does 6 times a second. And then they have other gears that every time this does it on its 6th time, the gears will turn the second hand. So because it clicks 6 times a second, you'll notice that automatic watches are smoother. They don't go tick, tick, tick. They actually go tick, 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 tick. And every time it ticks 6 seconds, that's 6 times, that's 1 second. It matches this wheel. It's a lot cooler because these watches don't work unless you work. You can set a battery watch and forget about it, and it'll run. It doesn't care about you. You don't care about it. It's just going to do its thing. The cool thing about mechanical watches is they can't work without you. If you're not manually winding that spring, if you don't get up every morning, turn a little knob and wind that spring, your watch isn't going to work. Or that's for mechanical. If you get an automatic watch, there's a gear that swings around and uses your movement as you're going about your day, and it winds that spring. So what's really cool about this watch is as you rely on it, it relies on you. And I also think it's really cool that this machinery has been around for like 200 or 300 years, however long watches have been around, and they can be almost as accurate as quartz watches. Now, mechanical watches, because it's only 6 beats per second as opposed to 21,000, there's a lot more room for error with 6 beats. So mechanical watches can be less good at timekeeping. They can be as off. Like if you were to match it with the perfect time atomic clock, by the end of the day, it might be 10 seconds fast or 10 seconds slow, even 30 seconds fast or 30 seconds slow. And by the end of the day, you're going, oh, it's only half a minute off. That's really not a big deal. So a lot of people with mechanical watches just reset their watch, once a week. And then, by the end of the week, it might be 2-3 minutes fast, which is no big deal, but that's pretty amazing. But it's a lot more, I don't know, I guess the word is like romantic. It's a lot cooler with mechanical watches. So that's why I wear them, because they're kind of a ancient thing of time, which makes it awesome. So anyway, the watch you have now is this, and they're cheaper, they're more easy to manufacture, they're usually more replaceable. You can either just replace the battery, or depending on how cheap the watch was, just toss it out and get a new one by the time the battery dies. But mechanical watches are really cool, because if it ever starts really slowing down, or it stops working, you can actually go to a jeweler, and he can take some of these gears and replace them and re-oil everything and get everything up and running again. And we call them heirloom pieces. You can hand a good mechanical watch will run for 100, 200 years. You can just keep getting it serviced and pass it down, and it's the same watch all the time. It becomes really cool. So that's what I'm trying to get you interested in. So that's your little lesson on the difference between quartz or mechanical watches. Hope you enjoyed it.